Hey gang, it's your boy. Previously, on a very special episode of my retro gaming history, I covered my experiences with the Nintendo Game Boy. This time, I'm here to take a look at the rest of the handheld systems I had, so sit back, strap in, and let's get to it. Sega! The year was 95. My family had just moved to a rural area, a fair distance from where I grew up. With little to do after the new house was constructed, other than hanging out with my sister and her group of friends, I got a part-time job, stocking shelves at a grocery store. Living with my parents, I didn't have any expenses yet, so I saved up for 2 purchases. The second was a red Ibanez strap. But the first was a Sega Game Gear. You see, my Sega fanboy antics had resumed since I got my hands on a Genesis, and my Game Boy was so uninteresting to me that it got left behind, gifted to a younger relative when we moved away, so I was looking to fill that void of portable entertainment. Game Boys were a lot like opinions. Everybody had one. So once I had my very own Game Gear, I felt really privileged to be a part of that niche 8-bit handheld experience. But like all smaller markets, it came with the challenge of scarcity. And by that, I mean a lack of good accessories and quality games in general. With the Game Boy's massive list of over 1,000 titles to access, finding 15 to 20 games that held up over the years was a cinch. Compared to the Game Gear's pool of just over 230 games in North America, you came up with a lot fewer options. Because of that, there were only 2 accessories I bought for the Game Gear. The Sega AC adapter, because you could rarely ever beat a game on battery life alone, and the Joy Plus Handy Gear. Now that wasn't for a lack of wanting on my part. If I knew it had existed back then, I would have bought the Master Gear converter to play my Master System cartridges. I only bought the Handy Gear because it seemed like a freaking unicorn in comparison to the other choices for the Game Gear. I mean, just look at this packaging. Water resistant, shock absorbent, screen magnifier, glare reducer, extra game storage, and a carrying strap. And this kit on the cover, just look at those sweet high tops, yo. Made by STD? I was sold, man. In reality, the short battery life of the Game Gear turned most of these benefits into moot points. The strap was lame, and the case had to be opened to change games. I think I used it a handful of times for its water resistance and its 2x screen magnification. And no, unfortunately, my Game Gear was not compatible with the TV tuner. Just like most of the revisions in the year since its release in 1991, I would have got one otherwise, seeing as antenna was already my only option for watching TV, but in reality, it would have just been me sitting by an electrical outlet with my own tiny version of what my family was watching anyway. But it's the games that make a console great, so let's see if my collection did the Game Gear justice. Starting with the pack-in title, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, which was an altered version of the Sega Master System release. Nice bit of chicanery by Sega with the box art on this game, giving the impression that Tails might be a playable character. Instead, Tails is kidnapped in the opening sequence by Dr. Robotnik and turned into a veritable damsel in distress. And now that I've searched that up, I hate the internet and myself even more. As far as game mechanics were concerned, you were limited to recouping just a few rings after spilling an entire load of them, and the spin dash wasn't a thing yet for the portable series. Aside from that though, the game was a lot of fun, with Sonic blazing through up to 7 zones comprised of 3 acts each. There were a few changes from the Master System release due to the smaller screen resolution that made it seem more challenging, and if you weren't able to collect all 6 Chaos Emeralds, the game was unbeatable, and would end at the 6th zone. That made using the complex level select cheat a waste of time if you wanted to see the good ending of the game. All things considered, it was a challenging and satisfying Sonic game in its own right, that included some catchy music. Mortal Kombat 2 was one of my favorite Game Gear ports. If you had a Sega console, you had to have at least one Mortal Kombat game. And this version had all the brutal and glorious fatalities of the 8 playable in-game characters. It did suffer from the downscale to the Game Gear cartridge size of 512 kilobytes. No babalities, friendships, animalities, or mercies, and only 2 stages were available to fight in. Fortunately, one of them had a stage fatality, and you could still battle the hidden characters, Smoke and Jade, who got their own special stage. The moves translated well to the handheld 2-button device, and surprisingly, many of the fatalities were executed the same way as they were on the Genesis. My favorite part of this game had to be the graphics. They suffered the least being adapted to a 160 by 144 3-inch square display. The characters were large and very detailed, and the background art was a close approximation of the Genesis aesthetic. The music was pretty good, though repetitive, as there's only 2 stages. For on-the-go combat, this game certainly hit the spot. Shining Force 2: The Sword of Hadja on Game Gear was my introduction to the Shining Force series. Anyone who's seen my live streams on my main channel knows just how much I love these games. It's JRPG, turn-based strategy, 8-bit weeb heaven. The story was one of opposing nations battling over borders. The evil Iam encroached on peaceful Cyprus, and so Prince Nick was sent to build a wall. Battle the forces of Iam in spite of his hand being turned to stone. The Shining Force was sent to aid Prince Nick in defeating the evil Iam by delivering the Sword of Hadja and rescuing him from captivity in the foreign aggressor's land. One of the most enjoyable aspects of the game was collecting all the members of the Shining Force as you progress through the 4 chapters, most notably the hidden characters Higgins and Rush. From the artwork to the music, this game was a pleasure to spend hours completing multiple times, usually with the AC adapter sitting near an outlet. And then there was I have mixed feelings about Chacon the Forever Man. I feel like it could have been executed a bit better. The premise of a comic book adaptation featuring a supernatural bounty hunter wielding dual elemental swords who defeated death in a pilgrim hat was awesome. The game was hard as hell, and anyone who's completed it on any difficulty setting has my respect, because I could only muster it once on easy. The controls were great, except for regular jumping. It was so awkward and labored that it was frustrating. But my main beef with this game were the graphics, specifically the color palettes. Everything was so dark and washed out on that old LCD screen. Enemies were super hard to detect, and items were at times hard to distinguish from the other muted colors of the background details. I feel like it could have been a much better game if only you could see it when you needed to. It seemed that if any glare appeared on your screen at all, you were done in by the next baddie in the shadows. Though that looked pretty cool too. In retrospect, I kind of wish I bought the Genesis Nomad, but it was well above my price range, especially with a solid need brewing for that Ibanez. I never had any buyer's remorse with the Game Gear though, and like I said, it was a niche experience that I wouldn't have traded for any other portable at the time. But like so many of my other consoles, once the magic was over, it ultimately ended up in the hands of one of my nephews, and he was more than happy to have it. Now, I was going to talk about the Game Boy Advance, but there's not much to say about it since I only finally acquired one in 2008. I bought a few games for it, but my son plays it more now than I ever did. So with that, I'll conclude this special 2-part episode of my retro gaming history. Let me know your thoughts on the Game Gear. If you had one, tell me what games you liked playing on it in the comments. The next leg of my retro gaming history will cover the 16-bit machines I got to experience and how they compared. But until then, Thanks for watching this video, and please check out the playlist for other episodes in the series. I've been your boy at D-Pad Gaming, and you've all been great. I'll see you next time. Peace out.